Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Divorced Woman's Guide podcast. How are you all doing today? I am really excited that you have joined me on today's episode because I am here with my friend Melisa Keenan. Hello, Melissa. How are you?
I'm great.
So happy to have you here. And everybody, we are going to dive into a conversation topic that, as Melissa and I were chatting about before we hit the record button, we had a similar conversation in one of my coaching groups. And it was so powerful that Melissa had to come onto my podcast and share her wisdom with you guys today around the power of feminine energy. She's also going to talk about intimacy and why both intimacy and feminine energy are important. So before we dive in, I want to share a little bit more about you, Melissa, with our audience today. So Melissa, go-to confidant for high-powered female CEOs. She helps them access their feminine energy as a 10 times growth strategy. Her clients produce more while doing less by mastering their feminine CEO, accessing their power through things like intimacy and connection. Melissa is a keynote speaker. She is also a USA Today best-selling and international best-selling author, as well as the host of the interview series Chronicles of High-Powered Female CEO. Melissa, welcome. And I love your story. And I know that it has contributed to the incredible and amazing work that you do today with all of your clients. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about that and how you came to do the work that you do today.
Absolutely. I definitely never saw myself sitting in the seat that I sit in. As a kid, I have a bachelor degree in biology. And so I thought I was going to be a doctor right now. I'm so glad I didn't go that route. I, you know, I, my, Let me give you just the short version of my story, which is that my female ancestors, all on every side, were so oppressed by their husbands. There was so much abuse and darkness and trauma. And that was the circumstances that I was born into, which I think led me to being really curious about what was possible for my life and being really dedicated to wanting to experience more than what I saw my female ancestors experiencing. And but then I had a really, really terrible childhood, like very difficult things. My parents divorced, drugs, abuse. My dad died when I was 12. My mom lost full custody of me, and I lived with my aunt and uncle from 12 to 18. So just a big old mess is what my childhood was. And I made the decision to get married at a young age and start having children right away, following my heart and following God, and feeling like I'm going to do this differently than anyone before me has done this. And that drive was fantastic, but the execution was like a shit show. If I'm going to be totally honest,
Yep.
it looked like control and perfectionism and micromanaging and never trusting my husband or myself, and even nitpicking. I remember my daughter, my gosh, when she was first born, I would like change her outfit 5 times a day because she got a little spill on it. It was like, well, it's not perfect now. So this is who I was, yeah, back then. 5 years into my marriage, my husband came to me and let me know that he had had a secret addiction our whole marriage. Initially, I didn't understand what that really meant. I said some really hopeful things to him about how he can change, and I was so glad he told me, and kind of had my head buried in the sand. But over time, I realized, wait a minute, this means he's lied to me a lot. This means he's lied to me about his whereabouts and what he's been doing. How many times? I don't understand. And then the nature of his addiction also meant it affected some of the most intimate things that we shared together. And so eventually I asked my husband to move out. and we were separated for about 6 months. During that time, we didn't know, I didn't even know if I was giving him permission to go move in with a girlfriend. Like, I really didn't know the extent of this secret other life that I didn't know anything about. And and it was from that place that I really began to know myself on a new level. I saw with all new eyes, like the way I was doing life, this masculine energy, controlled, measured way of doing life, where I was hustling and proving and doing all this was not going to actually produce the fulfillment that I wanted. And actually, I had oppressed myself and then ended up in a similar circumstance as my female ancestors. So here I was with three tiny babies. They were all in diapers, and it was like full surrender. And just building back from that space and really deepening into an understanding of who I was and beginning to love myself and love like the unknown and life as it is, was such a journey. My husband and I both worked really hard. It took about 2 more years before we really knew if this marriage was going to stick or not, if even moving back in together was a good idea. And eventually we got to this place where it honestly felt like a second honeymoon. It felt like I remember looking at him one day and just being like, I didn't know that this kind of connection and intimacy existed. I didn't know we could feel like this in a marriage. I'd never seen it before and definitely never experienced it in the relationships I had had. And so it was from that point that I was like, women need to know. People need to know that like it's not a fairy tale. And lots of personal development and stuff that went into that. But ultimately I think the biggest shift that I had was this piece around intimacy, that all I needed to do and all that life was requiring of me was to show up as myself. I just had to learn to love and accept me first, to see into me, intimacy, into me, see. And then everything else like falls into place. And so from there, of course, lots of certifications and things that would help me to have the right kind of tools and things. And I've been working with women and couples and also men for the last 4 years around intimacy and managing your masculine and feminine energy.
It's amazing. And an incredible story. And I've heard your story before, but I heard it differently this time, which was an interesting shift, because I hope that everybody listening heard that, any relationship really takes work. It took you guys 2 years to really work through and figure out, because you both were doing, I also want to pay attention, you were both doing the work. And that is why the healing process, whether it is reconciliation or not, is so incredibly important. And it is also incredibly important to come out on the other side and to realize what an amazing person that you are, and how amazing we are as human beings, like what our capabilities are as human beings. And more so when we allow ourselves to really lean into our feminine. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I know that not everybody listening understands what, feminine versus masculine energy is. And it's not being a woman and you have feminine energy. Everybody has both. So can you talk a little bit more about that and educate our listeners?
Yeah, I think it's important. There's an important distinction between three different ideas around feminine that I like to kind of lay out for people. One is cultural femininity, and this is what you think of when you think of being a girly girl or being a feminine woman. And it varies depending on your upbringing. Like, it's very dependent on your culture. For some women, that means, nails and eyelashes and whatever. For some women, that means like being in the kitchen 24/7 and like kind of being subservient to your husband. This is cultural femininity. And honestly, like, take it or leave it, right? Like, it is what it is. It's not in the context of what we're talking about. Um, the other thing is masculine and feminine energy, which refers to yin and yang principles, ancient principles that have existed for a very, very long time. And yin and yang, the yin is feminine, the yang is masculine. This is like the difference of feminine is being, where masculine is doing. Feminine is inward focused, masculine is outward focused. Feminine is flow, where masculine is controlled and structured. Masculine is focused on achievement, accomplishment, what you can produce, where feminine is more focused on your essence or sensing and feeling into things and even things like play and pleasure and being open and receiving. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about masculine and feminine energy. And the work that I do actually blends one more kind of femininity that I want to bring in because it's super important. What I call divine feminine, or maybe like a woman in her fullness, if you want to say that. To me, divine feminine is all the parts of what it means to be a full woman, your true identity, which is a beautiful dance of masculine and feminine energy, yin and yang. And it's basically all the recesses inside of us that we have thought throughout centuries we have to hide, we have to shut down, we have to stifle and push away. It's like bringing forward all parts of us and trusting that all parts of us are a gift. So those are the three kinds of feminine. Cultural feminine, it can be kind of damaging. It is what it is. It's good to see it and know the differences. And one of the things I love to do with women is ask, like, what were the things that you were taught by the women in your life that it means to be a good woman, air quotes around good woman, because typically there's a lot of like conditioning around that. And once you become a woman, you get to decide for yourself, like, do I like those things or do I not like those things, right? So that's cultural. Then there's the yin or feminine energy. And these are energy principles that just exist. They're not good or bad or right or wrong. They just are. And it behooves us to understand them. And then there's this concept around embodying our divine feminine.
Mm-hmm. I'm just writing this down because this is really good. I hope
Love
you guys
it.
are
I
all
love it.
taking notes as well. And I think it's so incredibly important for people to understand the differences, even especially with and I love the term divine feminine energy. That resonates beautifully for me. And, I tend to be somebody who is really strongly masculine energy dominant. And I know that a lot of my listeners are. I know that that's the type of client that I attract. And, and it's exhausting. Being in your masculine all the time is draining. And I find that it also really takes you out of being present, which I have found and learned that, feminine energy is really what allows you to have presence, right? To really be in that place where you are creating connection. So talk a little bit more, if you would, about how feminine energy sort of, it more grounds you in, as you said, it's the being, and how that relates to being in the present moment and creating connection with other people.
Well, intimacy is all about the present moment. I don't think that we can really experience intimacy when we're focused on the future or focused on the past. Like,
Right.
intimacy is that closeness, that connection, that feeling of unity with someone or something around you. So, absolutely, this requires our feminine energy. And I think it would be fun to give a few examples. And Wendy, because we've had a few conversations and I
Yeah.
feel like I know you now, I want to bring in some of the things you said to me. Because before we started this call, you were talking about some messes in your house, right?
Yes.
So culturally, for most American women, we would consider feminine things would be like keeping the house clean. That's super feminine, right? We would say that's a cultural feminine construct that we've created. And actually, the busyness and control around feeling like the house has to be clean and messes drive me crazy, that's our masculine energy kicking in, right?
That's what I was literally just telling Melissa, because there's some, movement happening around my house, and I am like, oh my God, there's boxes and there's stuff everywhere.
Also,
Tour is like, get rid of it right now.
the idea of like organization is a masculine energy concept. The idea of things need to be in a certain place or happen at a certain time. All of these things are in the realm of masculine energy. Some other funny things that we typically think of as feminine is service, right? Especially any Christian upbringing. Service, service, service. And for some reason, the women do all this service, right? Like that's the way you be a quote unquote good woman. That's feminine, right? Actually, giving is masculine energy, receiving is feminine energy. So all this, no, I don't need any help. I got it. Oh, like you can't even receive a compliment. You have to compliment the person back. All
Right.
of that is in the energy of masculine energy. So you can see now, if we bring this down to how does, feminine energy help us get into this present moment, or help us kind of like catalyze or have a breeding ground for more intimacy and connection. You can see why that would be the case, right? Like being open to chaos, even like loving it, even being able to like lean in and go, there's beauty here in this mess in my home, right? Or I was telling Wendy, I in my journey of developing my own feminine energy side, really meeting her and knowing who she was, and even like figuring out that I had that inside of me.
Same.
Right?
Yeah.
I had a friend make me a sign that said, embrace the messy life, because that was a thing for me that I had to just go, you know what? This is making me so miserable. What's the alternative? How can I approach this differently? So, and being open, being receiving, it's all like this connected space. So I now see the world as though everything is about intimacy. For me, I'm in a relationship with everything around me, even my home, even nature, certainly my relationships, certainly my business and my clients, and so where is intimacy with those things, right? Like in any given moment, the a good example is like the sand at the shore. The sand at the shore can be like this miraculous thing, right? Like, wow, this particle of dirt has probably been here for millions of years. Imagine all it's seen. I'm holding it right now, and I'm like now connected to like, whatever, millions of years of life that have lived on the
Before
planet.
you, the history of this grain of sand.
Right.
Yeah.
That's intimacy, right?
Yeah.
With a grain of sand. And in the next moment, all this dirt is getting up in my space. It's dirty. I can't stand it. I hate the sand, right? And I'm like, I don't like it. It's in the wrong places. I'm upset. I'm all like cumbered about, right? I can't control it. No matter what I do, I'm trying to get this sand off of me. So this is a great example of how we can be in any given situation in masculine energy or feminine energy.
It's so it's so perfect. And I know everybody can resonate with what you just said, because I'm like, oh my God, I have a love-hate relationship with sand too. And it's interesting when you think about it that way, that, and I'd like to go a little bit deeper into intimacy, because, as I've learned, even through my own experience, and as, I've coached my clients through, really them falling back in love with themselves to understand how to create intimacy. Let's go there. So can you get a little bit more specific and really define what intimacy is, how you get to create it, and that it's not just for the bedroom, right?
Um, yes. And why don't I start with saying this? example. Intimacy is everything, right? I just sort of explained how you can experience it in all places. You can experience it within yourself on emotional levels, on spiritual levels, mental levels, and physical levels.
Mhm.
And how we know that intimacy isn't just sex is because sex can have intimacy with it as the experience, or sex can just be sex. It can be robotic, it can even be hurtful, it can even feel like the worst disconnection you've ever felt, right? So that's how we know intimacy is not sex. Intimacy is something that can be enhanced through physical act of sex, but it's something so much more special and even magical. And so, just like when I was meeting with you in your group, Wendy, I think like it's hard to put a stale box definition around what
Right.
intimacy is because we all experience it differently.
It's a
I
feeling,
love
right?
Right, exactly. I love to ask people to ponder, like, when in your life did you experience intimacy? When can you think, like, when did I feel really close to someone? Some of the characteristics, right, of intimacy are safety. I feel so safe that I actually was willing to share and give of myself in a situation. I feel so safe that I was willing to receive someone fully. Another characteristic is trust. And sometimes it's not necessarily like so much trust in the other person. Like when I sit with a
Mhm.
girlfriend or something, like I don't have like implicit trust in her. I have trust in the universe that like this person's been brought into my life and I can share a connection with her and she's a safe person, right? So I can share something with her. Trust. So we've got safety and trust. Another characteristic is vulnerability. Always intimacy
Yeah.
involves vulnerability. And if we really break down, vulnerability is kind of like a trending buzzword ever since Brene Brown came around, which like I
Yeah.
love her so much, but I think we still kind of don't fully understand what it means. Like vulnerability always feels vulnerable.
Right.
I think we want to do the vulnerability thing. Like we think that sounds like a really good idea, but can I do that without feeling vulnerable? No, you can't actually. Like the idea is you have all this armor on and now you're going to show people where the singe in your armor is. Like this is where if you shot an arrow in, it would hurt. That's
Right.
what a vulnerability is, right? So, and that happens on all levels too, right? It's the same as sharing with a loved one, like, yeah, this happened in my past and I never thought I would tell anyone, right? It's the same as being like, wow, actually, I never told you this. We've had sex a million times, but every single time that I take my clothes off, I worry that you're not going to like the way I look. Like it's so real and tender and it brings up emotion. So that third characteristic is vulnerability. And yeah, with that comes emotion. And it doesn't always have to mean sharing the yuck either. It can be really vulnerable to like get so giddy with someone that you're laughing so hard that you're crying and now snot's pouring down your face. Right? That can be
Yes.
vulnerable. So it doesn't always have to look like the yuck, but it's this beautiful safe space that we can create. And I think we have more ability to create than what we realize. We kind of all are waiting for intimacy to happen to us, I think. And we're also all pretty afraid of it. The
Yeah.
more and more women and men that I've talked to, it's like, I want to be deeply seen and known so much. And I'm also terrified to be
Yeah.
deeply seen and known, right?
100%. I think the fear is a big one. And, so many of us that have been through divorce, right? There's a lot of betrayal that happens as to reasons that marriages end. And so the thought of trust and safety and vulnerability, all three of them feel terrifying to
Mhm.
anybody, which therefore, they're feelings that you avoid, hence you avoid intimacy, right? If those are the three characteristics, that's what people are avoiding at all costs. And yet they don't realize that they are still capable, right? Because many times we think like, oh, I'm never doing that again, but yet you are in other relationships, right? Like in the group when you came in to talk, so many people were sharing, the intimacy that they create with their friends, right, with their kids. And really wasn't until you talked a little bit more about this that they, it's like all of a sudden the light bulbs went on when they were like, oh my God, I didn't realize
Mm.
that I'm actually creating intimacy with other people. So it's not that I'm not capable, it's that in this area, right, I get to work on that. It's something that I get to build back because it's important. So why is that important? Why is it important for people to not only lean into their feminine more, but to also understand and allow themselves to feel intimacy again?
I feel like I'm so glad you brought back in this experience of the divorced woman, because it almost feels like we need to give her a little intimacy with herself for a minute. Like, if you've been listening and like you're now triggered like crazy, it's understandable. And maybe this is an opportunity to, I love, like, literally, we cannot experience intimacy with another more than we can experience it with ourselves. So maybe just take a moment and take a deep breath and notice the feelings in your physical body. And if that means like pushing pause or whatever you need to do, like honor the sensations that you're feeling and lean into them, maybe for the first time ever. The other side of our emotions, and this does answer your question, the other side of our emotions and letting ourselves feel our emotions, it reveals to us what we deeply value. So our emotions aren't the end all be all, but they're like a roadmap guiding us to our most fulfilled life. They guide us to, for instance, like, I'm triggered like crazy because I've been listening to this conversation and I never experienced that once in my previous marriage. And now I'm thinking, what was I thinking? Why did I ever marry this person? And how could I have been so hurt? Like, how could someone be like that, right? You're thinking all of these things, and it brings up feelings for you. And those feelings are likely guiding you to things like, I value connection. I value safety. It helps you identify what has been missing in your current experience so that you can then go and create it. You can create it for yourself, and you can create it in a new relationship when the time feels right, right? So I remember with my husband and everything that we went through, oftentimes connection and, like, the word was like, um, I want to say approval. Like, I was seeking approval all the time. And we usually judge ourselves for that. I like leaned into it. It's like, I feel like the worst person in the world for, all this shame for what I've just been through. I love connection, I want connection, and I want approval. And so I would go out and create those values for myself over and over and over by creating connection with friends, connecting with, like I said, I realize I'm connected to like everything. I like talk to the rocks and all of this, right? And then also approval. Like, I would literally text people in my life and say, I'm feeling a little low. Would you be willing to share with me like what you value in our friendship or what you value about me as a person? Like, I did vulnerable stuff because I wanted approval, and prayer too was a huge one. Like, can I just feel that, you approve of me, God, even if like it seems like the rest of the world and my husband and whatever doesn't approve of me. And I did that so much until the point when I was able to even extend that into my marriage and be like, I want to connect. And even now, I'll ask my husband for reassurances at times, and I'll say, like, I like like, are you happy with me? Like, that sounds like so weak. No one teaches you to say that stuff. But I will literally say, like, I need a reassurance. And can you tell me, these things? And it's just so beautiful, right? So we create this intimacy with ourselves and then with others. And the cost of not doing that, and we all know women like this, right? And you may be teeter tottering on the fence of being this woman of like, all this stuff hurts too much. I'm just going to shove it in a box and pretend it never happened. And I'm going to keep myself busy. And I'm going to say, I'm working on healing. I'm working on, getting myself worth back. And I just keep myself busy all the time. It's actually not the same thing as really working on yourself, right? And it's not going to lead to intimacy. And then what happens is we end up creating a life that we don't love. We end up
Right.
creating more unhappiness for ourselves. So that's why, intimacy really I think is like it's like the core of who we all are. We're meant to do this life together. We're meant to be with people and we're meant to be open and feeling and be vessels on the planet, right? Not robots. So that is where intimacy is so like I want to like plead with you and say, I know you feel like maybe that's never in the cards for me, but I promise you it is, even though people didn't treat you the way that they should have in the past.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And I appreciate you saying all those things. I mean, I had to learn how to create intimate conversation, right? Like what questions to ask or what even to say. And that in and of itself is vulnerable. Testing the waters and seeing if the other person responds to how it is that you phrase something. Intimacy is something that is created so beautifully through conversation. And it's something that I've learned in my 40s. I mean, I didn't understand intimacy prior to my divorce in the way that I understand and feel it now. And I know that everybody tuning in today has gotten so much wisdom from you. Melisa, what last tips or advice or wisdom do you want to leave with our audience today before we wrap our episode?
I would love to share because I understand the space and the pain that we feel when we're going through this shaky ground of having lost a connection, or feeling like we're losing the connection and commitment that we created at one time. Um, that the number one key, if you want to access your feminine energy and you're thinking, where do I even start? I know I'm so in my masculine all the time. The best place to start is self compassion, like very specifically applied. Like literally, when you start to think, I'm such an idiot, or what was I thinking, or judging yourself in any way, to pause and flip the script on that. Like, I love you unconditionally. And it makes so much sense that you're hurting right now. And it makes so much sense that you're scared right now. Like, literally putting your hand on your heart and speaking these things to yourself. It is absolutely the key to that, those inner recesses of yourself and rebuilding a trust from within so that eventually you can feel like you can extend your little trust bubble outside of yourself and bring other people in, let your love in again into your life.
Mm. So important and so beautifully said. I don't think we practice self compassion enough. And I love that you identified that as a way for people to take a step closer to stepping into their feminine. So, Melisa, I adore you. I love the work that you do. It is so incredibly powerful what you teach and how you teach it. So, thank you so much for being here. And I want everybody to know where it is that they can find you. And I also know that you have a free gift, of which everything's going to be in the show notes, everybody. But, Melisa, verbally, if you could share how people can find you and what your gift is to everybody.
Absolutely. So if you're on Facebook, a real quick search up is Women Manifesting Intimacy. You can just go type that into the Facebook search and find me there. It's a beautiful group for business women who want to experience more intimacy in their life. So there's people in there of all walks of life, all relationship statuses. And then the free gift is on my website, www.melisakeenan.com. And that is a free intimacy guide, which creates intimacy with yourself first. And so it takes you through some of the things I literally just talked about step by step with a situation that's pertinent to you, because we can sit around and like theorize about this all the time, but until you really bring it into your own life and experience it from the neck down, not just thinking about it, it doesn't really have the power. So go and take that intimacy guide, and it's fun. It takes you through, kind of some feelings and guiding you to what you deeply value, and then even creating an intimacy statement if you want to share that with someone else. So I'd love to connect with any of you. Obviously, if you do that worksheet, please email me and let me know that you did it, and I'd love to hear your results.
Amazing. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today. I adore you. It was so
Thank
great
you, Lily.
chatting with you.
Thanks so much.
Of course. Everybody tuning in today. Oh my goodness. I hope that you guys really enjoyed today's episode. I know that I took a lot of notes, and I always love asking those questions that I believe many of you guys are thinking. And hopefully, you guys got a nugget of information, if not multiple nuggets of information, to help you wherever it is that you guys are in your healing journey. Thank you so much for joining me today. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode that releases every single week. Sending you all so much love, light, and joy as always. Mwah. Bye, everybody.